Godspell.
Godspell.
Yes.
This is going to be this show isn't going up on Easter or even really close to Easter. It's going up like the week before or the week
Well,
of.
I mean, it's Holy Week, sir.
Oh,
Palm
well,
Sunday is Sunday.
that's true.
It's actually a perfect time to put it up.
Yes, and then there's no, Ash Wednesday was earlier, right?
No.
That's the
Well,
whole lead up.
Holy Week starts with Palm Sunday and ends with Easter. So
Yes,
from
and
Sunday to Sunday, you have the whole story playing itself out. Don't you
yeah,
listen to Jesus Christ Superstar? It has them days on it.
no. I saw the movie a long time ago, and I'm also a lapsed Catholic, so I get my dates all mixed up.
I'm a recovering Catholic, so there's a difference, I think.
Too much of that wine. No,
Yep, that's for sure.
so you had suggested talking about Godspell.
Yes.
We were talking just before we jumped on here that a couple of years ago we did sort of an Easter show with Kevin Smith's Dogma. Last year we may have done something, but both of us forgot because we had pandemic brain. But now we're talking about Godspell. This is a film that I had not seen.
Oh, good.
Ever. This is a first time watch for me, and you hadn't seen it in a while, right?
Yeah, I hadn't seen it in context in probably about 10 years. So yeah, it'd been a while. In fact, I had on YouTube, I had approached it song by song so much that I kind of forgot how it glued together. So it was really good to get it in context again.
So
basically it was new eyes. It was new eyes.
So do you listen to this music regularly? I mean, are you is it part of your rotation?
Yes, I really enjoy the soundtrack to this. Again, and we'll get into a little later, I have this little incredible snippet about the relationship between Jesus Christ Superstar and Godspell. But as a kid growing up in that era, those two are so interrelated that, it was almost part of the atmosphere. And Day by Day got to number 13 on the Billboard charts back in '72.
Really?
So, and that has such a simple, there's only like three lines in the whole song.
That's pop, baby.
I mean,
that's pop.
Talk about being great. As a lyricist, you're done. Here's my 3 lines. Stephen Schwartz, make it work. I think he wrote the lyrics and the music, but.
Yeah. Well, so when did Jesus Christ Superstar come out? Was this first?
Okay, no, I actually wrote this down because I wanted to get this right. Jesus Christ Superstar, the album, was released in October of 1970. Oh. The Broadway show opened a year later in October of 1971. Godspell in its current form, or the format that it's in now, it has a kind of interesting history, opened in May of 1971 off Broadway. So 7 months after Jesus Christ Superstar, which, injected this amazing, rock opera, and suddenly another opera about the Jesus story comes out 7 months later and becomes a sensation all its own. So and I might as well tell you this story. It'll be a good place to start, actually. Yeah. I interviewed Stephen Schwartz in 2010.
Really?
This was 11 years ago. Yeah.
Cool.
So here's what he said. I said, what was going on in the atmosphere where 2 Jesus stories came out within a year of each other? And he said, that kind of thing seems to happen a lot. An idea just gets into the air. You really don't know why, but different people do the same thing at the same time. But this happens a lot. I find that I'm working on something, someone else is working on something, and then you find out the 3 other people are working on basically the same thing. It's very strange that this idea seemed to get into the atmosphere and the ether. So there it is. It's almost spiritual.
Well,
Happy Easter.
Yes. I wasn't sure what to make of this. I think you had thrown out you'd thrown out a few movie ideas to me, and I had heard about Godspell. I think maybe it had been performed as a musical in high school or something that I didn't attend.
I'm sure you've run across it in some form. But at
at
least you've heard the song Day by Day, right?
I don't know. It's one of those. It's one of those songs that seems familiar, but I can't tell if I've jammed out to it. Okay. I didn't have the context for it, certainly, but I looked up the premise and it said it's a contemporary, meaning 1972, 73
Yeah.
take on the Book of Matthew set in New York City. And I was like,
Right.
done instantly. I got to see this, because I'm so used to the Jesus story being not so much an allegory, but a dramatization of
Right.
his life in the last days. And certainly we had the Last
The
Temptation of
the
Christ,
greatest
Jesus Christ
story ever
Superstar.
born.
Well, Scorsese might disagree with you, because he went to some crazy places, right? But I watched it, and also I saw that Victor Garber, an actor that I really like, but I've only seen him as an older man. I'm like, wait a second, he was really young doing this
Super
movie.
young.
So yeah, I gotta see this. So I watched it partially last night and partially this morning. I watched it in two
Okay.
parts because I'm an old man.
Yeah.
I was completely taken by this movie.
Great.
There's certain, I mentioned I was a recovering Catholic, and it
A
really
lapsed
does.
Catholic.
Well, you're lapsed Catholic. You're the recovering Catholic, right? I'm getting them mixed up. I'm also very tired. But there is something about these spiritual stories, like Leap of Faith, the Steve Martin movie. I watched a movie earlier this week called The Man from Earth, which is essentially about a caveman who survives 14,000 years, and he's just walking around. And I guess
Hmm.
spoiler alert, turns out he's been a lot of people during his life, including the inspiration for Jesus. It was essentially the idea that he was spreading a message of peace, and these superstructures latched onto that and kind of formed the religion that became Christianity. So I'm always very
Sure.
fascinated by these, and I tend to be very moved by them. And I was certainly moved by this story
Mhm.
because it really takes, I think, hippies to really get this right, because
Very
Jesus
hippie.
was like the proto hippie. So it's not surprising to me that in the early 70s, coming right off of the 60s, you've got
Yeah.
this kind of a spiritual renaissance in popular art and popular culture.
Yeah.
To see all these brightly colored, kids just jumping around and singing and acting out like the Beatitudes, and acting out the
Right.
parables,
Yeah.
and recreating the crucifixion in one of the most inventive and unsettling ways I've ever
Yep.
seen.
Yep.
It was a religious experience, to use a
Oh,
terrible cliche.
that's wild. To me, this is a movie that always makes me smile. Okay. It always gives me a little, inspiration and joy. It never fails to get me in a better place, because it really is about um, creating the spirituality of the man, and interpreting it in another way so that it becomes more accessible. That's what Jesus Christ Superstar did as well. I mean, I always say I know more about the Bible through Jesus Christ Superstar and Godspell than I do about the actual Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, uh,
Well,
I find myself sometimes quoting lines from Jesus Christ Superstar, thinking it's the Bible, and then somebody calls me on it. But anyway,
but it's the spirit of the thing, to
yes,
use
it's the
the
spirit
term,
of the thing,
to use another cliche.
and I think melding the flower power era with the spirituality of Jesus, it happened both in Superstar um, and Godspell, and Godspell even more directly, obviously, because they're modernizing it, and they're almost creating a troupe of actors and clowns who are going to tell you the story, but in a different way. And so the great thing about this, the pedigree of the film, is that it didn't go to Broadway till 1976. It went from Carnegie Mellon as sort of a senior thesis.
Of course, this has Carnegie Mellon experimental written all over it, and that's not a dig.
Naturally. So it goes to New York, and they said, hey, let's put music in this. Rather, I think what they had was the actions of how they told the parables and how they went along. But they actually went to New York and said, let's put music in this. Let's make it a musical. The first try at it didn't work. But then they brought Stephen Schwartz in, and he was able to meld the vaudevillian sense into it, and that created those memorable songs associated with it. Day by Day is just, to me, a standard of quasi proto hippie religion. But the rest of this time I really concentrate on the rest of the songs, and all of them have some sort of florid element into it that really hits your gut. And I know that's this is sappy. I am not cynical about Godspell, unfortunately. Probably.
And I don't think there's anything to be cynical about. I often wonder I was thinking a lot this morning while watching it, and partially last night. What would a modern young audience think of this movie? Would they even watch it? Because, Jesus is seen as kind of like corny and representative of all these kind of oppressive institutions and all this other stuff. But if you're really open to it, and I don't know if the vaudeville stuff would work, because even watching it today, this kind of overlapped with my generation. And even I'm like, wow, that reference is about a year and a half from complete obscurity. I think there's like vaudeville and probably some Burns and Allen in there. I mean, Jesus.
Well, I want to get the name right. Joanne Jonas is Joanne. And by the way, for the most part, they just use their real names. So that makes it easy on the set, I guess. But Joanne Jonas, the one who played the ballet dancer, she converted into the Mae West kind of sexual type that did the whole song. What's that song called? Turn Back, Old Man, which was in the Andrew Carnegie Mansion. And she was doing the Mae West riff. I think a kid today would watch it and go, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
But I think, theater kids, I think, know this show. If you're like in the high school in Glee, you know this show. You probably have sung it at some random assembly. But I think theater kids know this song. And then I think somebody who is like the same age as these people are when they're doing this, anywhere from, I would say, 19 to 25, you'd be like, hell, at least I can relate to them on an age basis, even though the songs are a little outside my reference purview. I think, yeah, definitely you make a great point when you say some of these references. This comes from the generation of Stephen Schwartz. So he was raised on Howdy Doody and all that stuff. So he's just translating the show business knowledge of his time into the show. In fact, he was doing it sort of old fashioned on purpose. So,
well, one of the other things that's kind of striking about this, and something I think that would resonate with modern audiences, kind of regardless of age, is diversity of casting, diversity of voices is very important today. And
yes,
we're looking at something that's almost 50 years old, and it's one of the most diverse casts, not only just like skin tone and stuff, but also perspectives,
right?
And they're all coming together. And there's maybe it's because they're under the Godspell of Jesus, but there's complete harmony and understanding. And there's this sort of the idea that hippie culture was rebelling against the man. They had this common, enemy. So they were all together. There's a lot of division today amongst, different cultures and subsets in America, which is why we're seeing a lot of this upheaval. I think this is something that could be seen as, it could be read as corny and unrealistic. But to me, it's like, yeah, this is possible. It was possible half a century ago. It could be possible again. And if so, it would be a beautiful message, even if you take out the whole religious aspect of it.
That's great. And, there was harmony, understanding, sympathy, and thoughts abounding. No more falsehoods. No, whatever. That's another show. That's from Aquarius, from Hair. I was trying to think.
Well, no, that reminded me of that too. I talked about that with Fowley last year, I think, and that was another thing that knocked me out.
Oh yeah,
that's one of my
favorite movies of all time.
With a tremendously dark ending where they're marching into the bomber that looks like the giant mouth just swallowing up those soldiers. I get goosebumps thinking
Yeah,
about that. But yeah,
it's amazing because they put in the play. This will be a quick aside, but I did see the original play, meaning the original way Hair was presented to Broadway audiences. And it's way different from the movie. In the movie, they were able to put context into this stuff. And Milos Forman, of course, created this amazing allegory for our desperate need to have war. And that's basically what Hair is about. Getting back to Godspell, you want gender fluidity? It is right here in this thing. Everybody plays any kind of role. This was gender fluidity 50 years ago before the term was even invented. And that's what makes it kind of special too, I think. I noticed this immediately this time when I watched it. I was like, wow, nobody really has a gender role in this. They're all just, and the girls are marvelously good looking and the guys are actorly handsome, but there's no, this was rated G, sir. G.
Yeah. Well, and which surprised me too, because there's some, like, there are a couple of, at least one moment where they're talking about the parable of, I don't know if it was the parable of the talents, but it was the one son who was it Lazarus,
The
maybe?
prodigal son or Lazarus?
Lazarus, I think, because it was the one
Right.
person, the girl had been sucked down into hell. And
Yes,
there's all
that
these,
was
she's being
beautiful.
taunted by these horribly masked creatures and what looked like a strawberry pie drowned in ketchup. I mean, that is horrifying
It's
enough.
very weird.
But I'm like, I don't know if I'd sit my 5-year-old down to watch this.
Well, what's interesting about that too is, and I wanted to bring up this point about the movie, what I noticed, this is a very cinematic film.
Yes.
Using the properties of cinema to tell a story in a very particular way. Number one, they are the only persons in New York City, it seems. You know what I'm saying? They're the only group of people going from place to place in New York City until, of course, you get to the symbolic ending. And of course, it begins like that too. They're part of a group, and suddenly they're not part of a group, and they're part of a group again. But the point is, it's an amazing kind of symbolic, cinematic way to show how the spirituality of Jesus flows into the general populace. And go ahead.
No, I was say that's something that struck me at the very end too, because at the beginning it's like the the Avengers origin story. You see all of the apostles in their day jobs. One's like hauling a rack of clothes down the street. The one is a waitress who's trying to read Ulysses during her.
Yeah, I love that.
Talk about a
Love that.
supernatural effort. And then they all see the images of Victor Garber as the Christ figure.
No, they see the images of John the Baptist.
He sees
Victor.
Jesus, yeah, and then so then John the Baptist well, no, that was Judas.
Well, no, he played both roles. He played the Baptist in the beginning, and then played Judas at the Last Supper.
At what point did they change that? Because there was they were an amalgam of characters. Okay.
Yeah, he's identified as John the Baptist / Judas.
Okay, because I didn't look at the credits of this, and I am a bit fuzzy on my
I got everything right here. So you have a question about that?
Well, and they also diverged a bit from the story, because at the crucifixion, right, there was supposed to be the two other criminals who were crucified with Jesus.
I think that's in a specific book. It might not be in.
Was that
Matthew.
not for Matthew?
I don't know.
Okay.
But you edit too.
I just thought it was a neat choice, because when I'm watching it, I'm like, this is really powerful. I'm kind of glad they didn't try and convolute it with some other kind of an element, but it did stick out to me a little bit.
Go ahead.
No, but it's the idea of them, once they make that decision to follow Jesus on this crazy quest, the entire rest of the world sort of falls away.
Yeah.
And they have to they have to deal with elements of that world with each other, because as they're being taught these things, they're having to shake off, well, I am the villain in this parable, I'm the hero in this parable.
Right.
Jesus is sort of
I'm a
guiding
man,
us.
I'm a woman. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. it's a really unique way of telling the story. And what you're talking
Really
about
unique.
visually, instead of, in addition to just clearing out New York, which I don't know how the hell they did for a lot of these
You
shots.
could do that in the 70s.
Well, yes.
Different time.
Well, but it was also, they made the most of the environment of New York City. I don't know if this
Yeah.
was in the Carnegie Mansion or not, but it was that scene on the stairwell where
Mhm.
they had these giant ornate stairs, and the actors were all peeking their heads and hands through it to make this really
Oh, yeah.
strange kind of a tapestry of bodies
Yes.
meshed together. I'm like,
That was
that didn't cost a thing.
right. Well, you bring up a great point. I was astounded by the use of actor and scene to create energy rather than having to have someone come in, 50 guys building a set. You used what was there, and you use your actors, and you use their hands, and you use the choreography, and you use the motion. And like you said, that scene where they're peeking behind the those signs. It was just marvelous invention the whole way. I was just so astounded by that. And that brings up the next point I have to bring up, and this is just mind blowing, and it has a philosophical question involved with it. So, all for the best. That's the beginning of it with the signs and everything. And it ends, of course, on the North Tower of the Twin Tower, which was, of course, destroyed on September 11th. And my philosophical question, which I posed to Stephen Schwartz, even though I never published it, was you gave that statement, it's all for the best. They're dancing on top of the Twin Towers. Was the attack and the subsequent world we live in now all for the best? Does that philosophy, because of history, redeeming itself constantly? We redeem the world and our environment through history constantly. Was that almost a prediction for how the world possibly has to deal with something like 9/11? It's all for the best. I just saw those actors. They're freaking like 4 feet away from the back of that thing. You may take one misstep and you're going down 110 floors, baby.
Yeah, there's some real man on wire shit going on there for real. But what was his answer?
Think he said, he said, I get a lot of questions about that because of how they did that. I can't recall. In fact, I have to find a recording somewhere. I have it on some hard drive somewhere because it reminded me to re-listen to that whole interview. But I really don't think he commented on it as much as I say. He was actually just listening to what I was saying about it, much as you're listening and saying, "Are you fucking insane?"
No, but
But didn't that strike you? Didn't you have a whoosh moment when they pulled out and there it is, the Twin Towers, and they're dancing on top of them, singing "It's All for the Best"?
Well, the Twin Towers pop up a couple of places. I think
Yeah,
there's a shot earlier because it's New York in the 70s. It's in every
right,
movie
right,
that's
right,
in New York, right?
right.
So it was like, oh, that's right, the Twin Towers. It's been 20 years. Oh my God. But then to see them dancing, and then you pull out and you realize where they're dancing, that's shocking. It's almost prescient. The idea that
Yeah,
the filmmaker did that shot, be like, this is going to blow some minds, 30 years from
yeah.
now or whatever.
That's exactly what I was postulating. Yeah.
But there's another shot. I think I wrote this down somewhere in my million pages of notes, where it pops up again in the background.
Yes.
And Jesus had said he was giving one of his speeches, or
Right.
singing a lyric from a song. And then you see the towers in the background. It just felt like it was very resonant. I mean, to the greater point, I don't think that they could have known when they were putting this together what
Oh
was
no,
going to
no.
happen. But
I'm saying in retrospect.
right. But it is an interesting question. I mean, because you can look at it from sort of an American middle class perspective. Yeah, we recovered from 9/11, kind of. But then you look at all the places around the world that are still feeling the ripple effects of that terrorism and the United States response to that terrorism. Like, oh, they're a century away from even beginning to recover, because things have only gotten worse.
Right.
But I think the philosophical question is, God, and I'm out of date with my scripture. I mostly know it from movies, but he never he never promised us a rose garden.
Right.
He never said that life was going to be easy.
Right.
He said that paradise would be easy if you followed him. And a lot of people look to those 10 commandments and modeling the life of Jesus as best they can. Everybody's imperfect,
Right.
but saying life is a lot easier, even through the struggle, if you keep things simple and just try and do the right thing all the time, or at least as often as you can.
Well,
So,
isn't really the song just saying, hey, despite our woes, it is all for the best. Things are going to happen. Towers are going to fall. Wars are going to occur, but it also exposes a lot of times when evil occurs, it exposes the sin of the evil. And when the sin of the evil is exposed, maybe we can do something about it. Just like the pandemic has exposed a lot of ills in our society.
literally,
The inequity, huh?
literally exposing the
Yes,
ills.
yes, the ills. I mean, how inequitable it is in this country, especially. I mean, what has been one of the overriding consequences of everybody being kind of out of step for a year? The people who really control the world has swept in, brought the stock market up 10,000 places, and have cleaned up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like crisis and opportunity. How do we create the opportunity from each crisis? It's all for the best.
Yeah,
I didn't
and
mean to
there
be
are many
misleading,
ways
but
to
I'm just, it's interesting to me.
well, no, and we could have probably an entire series answering that
Yes,
question.
exactly.
But what I love about movies like this is, I've always been a fan of Jesus and his ideas, and not
Yes,
necessarily, or people believe that he doesn't, he never existed, or he was an amalgam of people, or he's
right.
based on figures from older religions. I don't know exactly what I believe. I just know that even if he's a fictitious character, he's still a really cool dude, uh, I'm
I,
always touched by seeing stories of his example and wondering where I fall short in my life, and that those examples inspiring me to want to be better, to be kinder to people,
right.
to take the time to listen, to reach out to folks. Um, Regardless of what you think of the superstructure that came out of it, be it Catholic, Methodist, Protestant,
Right.
whatever, you can still look at the basic message and see, there's a roadmap here of how to live well.
Well, you never want to see exploitation in
Mm-mm.
any realm of thought or philosophy. And there's plenty of exploitation to go around when it comes to the core Jesus story. But like you, I agree with him philosophically, and I understand why his message keeps resonating, because it's very simple and very poignant and can lead to a better life if it's properly assumed.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's what the movie is saying too, in a sense. They're trying to strip it down to its essence, its core. What are the stories here? What are the stories that matter? Here they are in a nice song and dance format.
Yeah.
How about the choreography? I love the choreography in this.
The singing, the dancing, yeah, it's all top notch. But I mean, for me, it was the choreography of the Last Supper, where
Yeah,
he's saying
beautiful.
goodbye to all of his friends,
Yeah,
and the camera's kind of like following him. It's very close up, but he gets
yeah,
time with each of them, and then he sends Judas away. He's like, "Go do what you have to do, but do it quickly." I
right.
mean, again, goosebumps. I can't.
He also did jazz hands.
Yes, the jazz hands. Well, the thing is, we often, at least in the popular sense, we think of the 12 apostles as a collective. This movie really takes the effort to, even though I don't think we get any of their names really. We like when
No,
we were talking about like John and Judas. I didn't even pick up on that because they're not constantly calling out to each other by their names.
no, they're no. Yeah, in fact, when he says Jesus Christ, he puts his hand over his
Yes.
mouth. That was very good.
But my point is, they're all treated as individuals. They've all got their own personalities,
Yep.
their own distinctive kind of looks at everything. So when it comes time to say those goodbyes, you really feel it on an individual level. It's not like, oh, I got to
That's
just go say goodbye to each of these people. It felt like each
right.
scene he gave 10 minutes, even though it was only 30
Right.
seconds.
That's a really good point. And also, too, who was your favorite disciple?
That's tough because I can't,
There's
I
got to
don't
be
know their
somebody
names.
who
Well,
wrote. Well,
I'd
just
basically,
describe the
I'd have to say it was the guy, it was a couple of them. The kid with the giant afro. Um,
from Chicago, by the way,
really?
Merrill
Okay.
Jackson. Yeah,
All right. And then the other guy who looked kind of like like Luigi from the Mario Brothers or something, the big
I call him the
mustache.
mustache in the movie.
Okay.
He's Jerry Soroka. He was the parking attendant. Remember, he was the one causing the traffic jam in the
Yes.
beginning.
I also liked the Mae West. I liked everybody. They're all
I
such
love
great performances. Who is
I
yours?
love Day by Day Girl. I'm sorry, Robin Lamont. Uh,
Is that why you
Godspell
is that why
girlfriend.
you got together with a Robin? Is that it?
Well, maybe it was in the back of my mind, I guess. But she's interesting because she was in the original Carnegie Mellon crew. She opened it on off Broadway. She did the movie, and then she opened it on Broadway. All through the line, man. It's just
Wow.
like Yvonne Elliman. Yvonne Elliman in Jesus Christ Superstar was the original singer on the album, opened it on Broadway, and then was in the movie. But Lamont does her one better because she was in the actual creation of it and then did off Broadway. She even probably did the act with the old songs.
Wow.
I mean, crazy. I know.
Well, I also one of the highlights, one of the discoveries. I can't say she was my favorite character, but she's definitely up there. I was mostly just in shock at who I was watching, but Lynn Thigpen,
Oh,
another actor,
yes.
much like Victor Garber, who I only
Yeah.
knew from older roles. Like she was in Lean on Me as the mother who was giving
Yeah.
Joe Clark a hard time. She was in a movie we talked about, Bob Roberts,
Yes.
the interviewer who kind of pushed back
Well,
on Bob early on. She's wonderful here. It's such
yeah, she's so good.
that
She had never sung on stage before. She'd only been a dramatic actress, and
wow.
she killed her one number. It's just that's one of the highlights too in a movie of highlights. But arguably, her and Garber are the two breakouts.
Yeah.
The rest of them, I have some information on that. They'll blow your mind too about the rest of the cast, but we'll save that for a while.
Right.
Yeah. The Beautiful City, the song Beautiful City, which again, what a cinema moment. He moves up the canyon of skyscrapers, and in the distance, you see the troupe walking through probably at 5:30 in the morning as soon as the sun came up, and and doing that song, Beautiful City, which it was written for the movie and has now been added to the musical, much like the movie Songs in Greece, where it has been since added to the musical. So,
Well, one of the songs stuck out as being something from my Catholic upbringing, an actual like church hymn, and that was one of the opening numbers, "Prepare ye the way of the
oh
Lord."
yeah.
And the thing and this is something that Kevin Smith brought up in Dogma, which is the Catholic ritual is so mournful in its presentation. It's like you listen to the words and then you listen to the way they're intoned and they're completely incongruous. Like
Right.
we are prepared to receive the mystery of our faith. Like we are prepared to receive the mystery of our faith.
I know.
And then it's
Well,
like I was always brought up on prepare ye the way of the Lord. Here it is, like this giant, boisterous, celebratory number. I couldn't believe what I was watching because I never even thought that song could be performed in any other way.
one of my most enjoyable times in the Catholic Church growing up was around Easter, because they did the Passion Play. They do the Passion Play on Palm Sunday, and then they do it on Holy Thursday. So the crowd plays the crowd at the crucifixion. So you talk about the mournful intonement. Crucify him. We have no king but Caesar. You know, nobody wanted to be too enthusiastic that time. You know, you know, crucify him. That's what I wanted to do one time, of course.
You're gonna get
What-
excommunicated. No,
speaking of this Catholic dogma within there, well, there's not. It's Christian dogma. I'm not going to call it Catholic dogma. But what do you think of predetermination? A lot of the Jesus story is about predetermination, meaning that his coming was foretold. When everything that happened in his life was foretold in some obscure Old Testament thing, but what is talk about the mystery of faith? The whole thing regarding the Last Supper and up to the crucifixion is all predetermined. That he knows he has to accept this fate for his philosophy to move on,
mm-hmm.
Or at least that's how the gospel writers framed it. So anyway, I mean, I thought the predetermination in this was handled again exquisitely. Much you see it a lot in what you just mentioned, the goodbyes he gave to everybody. You know, this was the final goodbye, but it was predetermined before. Therefore, the interconnection that he makes with each disciple is based on what that disciple has to carry on about him, because there's the gospel writers right in that circle. It's just Matthew was the tax collector, by the way, and there's a lot of the story has to do with the difference between rich and poor, and the city itself is an inequitable circumstance for the people who live there. But here's this group of hippies going through and doing the Jesus story. So anyway, predetermination is always a very interesting aspect of the Gospels that I've always been fascinated by.
Me too. And I've wrapped my head around this and turned my brain into knots for decades thinking about this. The idea if, and George Carlin kind of riffed on this too, about the
Sure.
Ridiculousness of prayer. Like if you're praying for God to give you a parking spot, like what was that not in his plan? He's going to change his plan just for you. Right. So, but if he knows everything that ever has been and ever will be, then how can we have free will? Because there's literally nothing we can do that would go against. It'd be like splitting the cosmic atom. Like it would just blow up the entire program.
Oh, so, I think he's proved it. Carlin is dead.
Shortly after writing a book called "When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops?"
Very good.
But yeah, it's something that people are going to be arguing about until literally the end of time, when we'll all be proven either correct, incorrect, or there'll be some completely alternate explanation. But what I liked about this film is there was an element of surprise. There's a big party. They're all skipping through the city and learning lessons and all that stuff. But then when the giant Pharisee shows up, this hulking mound of like debris as a giant face manned by, kind of puppeteers on the inside with this really creepy worm nose.
Again, great use of a cinematic or simplicity, but go ahead.
But that was the authority, what you're saying about Matthew being a tax collector and the system sort of sharply taking notice of this threat to its very existence, catching them on a rooftop, and everybody is shocked. They're like, oh, they want this guy dead because he's dangerous.
Right.
I thought that was a very striking moment. And then later in the garden, which is just the junkyard from the first part of the film,
the first part where they sing day by day.
Right, but redressed to like rainbows, and it's pristine. I didn't even recognize it as the same place except for the pinball machine that's in the corner, in both locations.
Right,
but
it's evening too.
Right.
But really, this all this action happens in one day, correct?
I think
Did
so.
you get that impression?
That's what it's supposed to be, a longer stretch of time, but they condense it to one day. And I think that's kind of beautiful. But you see Victor Garber really wrestling with this idea where he goes off to pray and he's talking to God or himself, or however you want to interpret that. And he's
Right.
like, I'll do this, but I really just want that cup. I think it was like, I want this cup to pass me by. But if it doesn't,
Take this
that'll
cup
be
away from me.
right. And you really feel that suffering. Like I can almost
Right.
imagine God up there being like, I know, kid, you got to do it. I'm sorry.
Are you familiar with Superstar, Jesus Christ Superstar?
I think I saw it once, and then I saw
Are you
a high
familiar with
school production of it. I
the
really,
music? Do you know it?
I know the main song, and I know I don't know how to love him.
Yeah, go on YouTube and check out Gethsemane, the song about him. It's called "I Only Want to Stay,"
Okay.
and they do it beautifully there too. But again, in its simplicity, Godspell is equal to the task, just because of the simplicity. It's a lot more complex in Superstar. I mean, in Superstar, they're doing the real Jesus story. They just happen to be singing, you know. But here they're doing a metaphor, a traveling troupe of goofs suddenly becoming the disciples, you know.
Well, it's interesting
So
to me that the movie, and I assume the play, the stage production opens with the John the Baptist character who looks more like what you would imagine Jesus being. A tall
right,
guy, very handsome, bearded,
right,
blonde hair, and like, oh, this has to be our Jesus figure. But no,
right.
it's this goofy looking, Garfunkel character,
Almost like
clean shaven, in a
well,
Superman outfit
almost
with
like
suspenders.
a Sergeant Pepper guy, you know.
Yeah. So
And it's beautiful. He's singing it alone on the Brooklyn Bridge, one of the most iconic structures. And the way the camera goes from the traffic, the nasty traffic, up to this solitary figure with this kaleidoscope, you know, uh, whenever he's pushing his push cart. And I just get chills at that scene. I really do. I get chills a lot in this thing, but
well,
that's one of the great openings.
it's one of those movies that as a first timer, at least because I'm seeing this as
Oh
an
yeah,
adult, right?
right.
I almost need to go back and watch it right away because I'm still the initial scene where they're in New York and they're just cutting to the different characters before they decide to go on this quest. I don't know who they are or what they're doing or what the significance is. If this person's actually a player in this or like a background player later on, they're all very important. And it's like, I feel like if I were to go back and watch this tomorrow, I'd have a whole new context for the first at least half hour of this movie.
Yeah, and also too, the locations are very, very important, and they become larger in the case of the Twin Towers later. It was interesting you talk about when the Twin Towers appear, because every time they appeared, I sort of, focused my attention a little more to see what he was saying in case he was predicting more things. All for the best. There were a couple of dangerous things they had to do. They had to um, uh, dance on the top of the Twin Towers, literally feet away from just falling 110 floors. And then on the boat scene, they're dancing on the boat like they're not going to fall in. There's no rail there. I was like, geez, these guys talk about going through heck for your art.
Well,
But
there's part of that maybe plays to the times, or maybe it's just the talent of the people. I really believed that I was watching folks who really wanted to be there and wanted to be performing and almost believed that they were these characters. Victor Garber, I keep
sure,
bringing his name up, but there's a childlike innocence to all of the apostles and especially Jesus, to watch him explain things to people. You almost feel like you're learning lessons from your kid because your kid is seeing the world through kid eyes and not the
right,
cynical kind of corrupted adult point of view. And like, this is really important. And he's so happy to be sharing what he knows that's ancient wisdom with
yeah.
people who should know it, but obviously don't for some reason.
Well, you bring up a good point too about it saying in the 70s, when we first see Jesus, he definitely has a 1970s body. There's no working out on that thing at all. If it was done today, the guy would be buff.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
it'd be like Chris Pratt or something. Yeah.
anyway, During the Prepare Ye song, they are baptized in the first off, I want to talk about that traveling shot he used, where when they were approaching in their garb of everyday life, it was almost like a tracking shot where he followed them running, but the background was moving in the same direction whenever he came onto them. They were all going the same place. It was crazy, another cinema thing. But the fountain is the angel of the waters, which has been used in countless movies, especially Angels in America. It's probably the prime symbolic thing in that HBO show. But the whole fountain area is called the Bethesda fountain. And the Bethesda refers to a location where Jesus healed a paralytic. I mean, the broader scope of what they were doing with those locations, when you add in the Twin Towers and what happened to them, makes this movie almost like otherworldly in a sense. You know, they unconsciously were creating something that was going to snowball if you just give it 50 years. Watch 50 years from now. People love this movie. It bombed at the box office. It didn't make back its nut at the box office when it was released.
That was going to be my other
I
question.
think
How did this do?
it had a release sort of at the same time as Jesus Christ Superstar. So again, these things clash, you know, as works.
It's,
And, you know,
it's the dueling asteroid
I could see somebody saying, "Oh, Godspell, that's that thing about Jesus. Let's go see it." This isn't it. I have the album at home. This isn't it. You know, that's crazy. Why did those two things? They deserve to come out at different times with their own kind of space, but somehow, in some way, they clash together, and now, you know, now they're separate. You know, the years, you know, finally we see the separation. But back then, I doubt anybody saw the separation between the two. So maybe they just saw Godspell was a continuation of Jesus Christ Superstar, or vice versa.
It's the sequel because it takes place in modern day New York.
Yes, exactly. But here's the words in Day by Day. Day by day, oh dear Lord, the things I see, pray, see thee more clearly, love thee more dearly, follow thee more nearly, day by day. That's it. That's the whole song. And he was able to frame it and in stanzas and verse, and it's so beautiful. I mean, you know, when they do the finger thing, you know, 1, 2, 3, you're just like, exactly, you know, this, if I'm going to bring this philosophy into my soul, I have to do these 3 things, you know. And she's touching his fingers as they go over the 3 things, you know. It's just like so simple but so effective as a piece of cinema.
Well, this is kind of tied into that, the Pharisee scene, which also takes place on a roof or some kind of an open garage or something like that.
Yeah.
Jesus is yelling at the Pharisee, and I feel like he's quoting scripture because he's saying, "Ye Pharisees and ye lawyers," kind of casting aspersions on on the legal profession. I was like, why would he have a problem with lawyers? Now, I personally know a few lawyers, and they're all really good people, and they're cool. But I understand a lot of people don't like lawyers, and that really bugged me. I was thinking about it throughout the rest of the film, and it occurred to me, if the commandments or the laws of how to, you know, enter the kingdom of heaven according to this philosophy are so simple, then what is the law except a bunch of contracts compounded and contracted by men to overcomplicate the way to navigate yourself through the world? If
I think I mean, that's a pretty direct way of saying it, because we as men contract our lives from the minute we're born to the minute we die. Everything's a contract.
Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it.
Well, I'm just thinking, if man were more perfect and more easily able to abide by those commandments, because we're obviously demonstrably not, then there might not be a need for these complex systems. But those were sort of written for the most perfect version of ourselves, which we're being built to aspire to, but we also need room to do that in the absence of other people who might not have those same ideals even.
Right. No, and also too, a friend of mine who's a lawyer gave me some great advice. He said, never be involved in anything where you have to hire a lawyer. So So a little more trivia. Most of the cast was from the New York production, except for Garber, who came out of Toronto. Now, do you know the legend of the Toronto Godspell?
No.
This was 1972. These were people off the street who, and this is the most famous production. These are people off the street who auditioned and got the roles. Listen to this cast. Victor Garber as Jesus, went on to the movie. And of course, went on to a fairly, memorable career that's still going on. Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, Gilda Radner, who famously couldn't sing but could act and talk to sing hell of it. Dave Thomas and Martin Short with Paul Schaefer on keyboard.
Out of here with Paul
all
Schaefer on the
starting up, all like 19 to 25. That was the Toronto cast off the street, auditioned, and was in Godspell. And this was a sensation in Toronto. It ran for 800 performances. They took it from smaller theater to bigger theater to bigger theater. Just this talent, the sheer weight of the talent brought that thing to fruition. So Garber was the only one from the Toronto cast, but he plays the biggest role, Jesus. And then Jerry Mustache Soroka, the guy with the stash, he was from the Boston cast. Lynn Thigpen was from the LA cast, and Merrill Jackson was from the Chicago cast. Merrill had auditioned for the Chicago company, got picked, found out they were auditioning for the movie, got picked for the movie, came back from the movie, and picked up at the theater production and ran to finish the run in Chicago in the early 70s. Isn't that a great story? And then died at 38. So this is the other piece of trivia. The cast members who are dead. David John the Baptist Haskell, 52, died of brain cancer. Merrill Jackson, 38 years old, unknown why he died. Jeffrey Jazz Hands Milet, 36, unknown. Lynn Thigpen, 54, brain hemorrhage.
Wait, she died at 54?
54. She had just done Anger Management, the movie with
Adam Sandler and Nicholson,
Sandler.
Right?
Yeah. So unknown is Katie Waitress Hanley, Jerry Mustache, and my girl Robin Lamont. No Wikipedia on them.
And that's something that I hadn't even really thought of until you started talking about it, is aside from the people that I mentioned as having recognized, the two of them, I was thinking, why have I not seen these other performers anywhere?
Right.
Like, why aren't they bigger? Because they're uniformly amazing in this film.
Right. You would think they would take that film and create an energy that would get them into other things. I mean, Jeffrey Milet had a few, if you look him up, not Milet, the guy who played David Haskell, who played John Baptist. He had sort of a career, he did these like bit parts in a few movies, but nothing it was only Lynn Thigpen and Garber who broke out. Robin Lamont, I'm interested to see what she did, but again, no wiki on her. I find the deaths of the cast to be fascinating in the larger predestination context of doing this musical. And the last point I'll make about that, it would be marvelous to be that young and be involved in that kind of project that is going to live on. And you're going to see it 40 years from now, and I'm sure they've experienced this, where they're watching that, and we couldn't have done it any better. We are the perfect age, perfect time, perfect direction, perfect musical. Done.
Well, I hope that they had that sense, because when a movie comes out that obviously everyone pours that much passion and energy in, and then it bombs for whatever reason, it's the dueling asteroid movie, it's whatever. Right. But then you can be left with a sense of, and maybe this is one of the reasons we didn't hear from them again, because everyone knows when you're in a movie that's high profile, it's got a lot of heat, but then it fails to perform, you're kind of like, well, what's my next role? Oh, you were in that movie that tanked, get out of here.
You were in that Jesus Christ Superstar movie. No, it was Godspell. What difference was it? You're done in this business.
But I would hope that they would have had been able to realize some level of comfort or acclaim later in life, especially because some of them died so young. If they're dying at 30, that means that, they died probably in the 80s, maybe even not even hitting the 90s, which is unfortunate. Here's a question. The Canadian production of Godspell, did they have to change that song name to A by A? Sorry. I've been thinking about that joke for 10 minutes.
Like that to come up with. You did it, boy. You did
it. Well, I think we've done it. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I love the movie. It's one of my it's my favorite depiction of all time of Jesus Christ in Victor Garber. It's so unique and so perfect to what I would imagine him being like as a character, that I hope that if I die and do get to meet Jesus someday, if that turns out to be true, that it's not actually Victor Garber, please live long, but that it's an image of Victor Garber in a Superman shirt and suspenders, giant bozo shoes, and that Garfunkel fro.
If truly heaven is your own concept of it, that will come to pass. For me, it will be him shirtless in his 70s body, but that's for another show.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Pat McDonald.
5 out of 5, and I know you're giving it a perfect score as well. And if you're really looking for an Easter movie that's going to give you a little Holy Week inspiration, whatever you want to call it, Passover information. Hey, he does the Jewish prayer at the Passover meal in the movie. Go and rent Godspell, because it's available on all platforms, as they say.
It's coming up on 50 years. I think next year, the year after, and I'm
hoping, 2023.
Right. I hope they do some kind of a big Blu-ray release or a special edition with stuff.
It needs a real. There is a background piece on YouTube. I don't know if it was put on one of the DVD reels, but somebody did go in and follow the cast through their meanderings through New York, and it's quite revealing. So definitely pick that up too if you've seen the movie and just want to see something else. And there's a lot of good stuff on the internet about Godspell and the making of the movie. So there's stuff there. But you're right, it needs a real fine, like a Criterion collection. Release.
All right. Well,
this hear me, Criterion. You never answer any of my emails.
Well, look, we have the power. Remember, a few years ago we were talking about Joe. I had to buy that freaking 20-year-old DVD for $40 off the internet, and the next year they come out with a special edition Blu-ray for half the price. So, but Criterion, yes. If you're listening to us, send Pat and I both the special edition of Godspell when it comes out. None of this waiting for the half price sale in November nonsense. Pat McDonald.
These things I pray.
Well, thank you very much for the musical accompaniment and for the accompaniment here. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you too, sir.
I love you, man. This has been great. I can't wait to talk to you about something next month.
All right.
Peace be with you.
That would be great to have the music swell underneath at the end and then play out.